Hello, welcome back. This is the second week that I've done this in a row, hoping to make it a regular thing just to get myself in front of the camera, to make content, and also potentially, allow my experience to give some kind of insight, maybe helpful insight to people. So I have a list of 7 questions that have been asked of me or have been asked in the past that I've written down, and I'm going to answer them in no particular order. Here we go. I'll try to do this quicker than I did last week's. Let's see here. What's a small step I can take today if I'm interested in exploring a creative career like yours? What's a small step I can take today if I'm interested in exploring a creative career like yours? My creative career is a result of me it's come after me having a lot of exploration of what it is that I want to do. Part of my journey, my creative journey, has been trying to discover what is it that I want to do? What do I want my career to be? So, and so to answer that question, what small steps can I take to have a creative career like yours? Well, one, I had to find out what my career was, and so much of my success, or what I feel like is success, so much of my happiness comes from having a singular vision and knowing that this is an animation studio, stop motion studio. There's a type of client that we want to serve, and there's an ultimate goal even beyond client work that I have set before me. So, what small step can I take to explore a creative career? The small steps would be get experience doing a lot of things. Find out what it is that you're passionate about. And so I would say, if you're asking the question, what can I do to get a creative career? You're obviously a creative person. So, explore what that means. Or do you like making things with your hands? Do you like singing, songwriting? Are you a musician? Are you, there's so many avenues for your creativity, and finding the one that best makes sense for who you are and what you want, ultimately, really is the thing that I feel like is most important. But right now, if you're talking about small steps that you can take, I'd say, first, just try to get as much experience as you can, whether that's animation or just, the creative world in general. Okay, next question. How do you approach lighting and stop motion animation, and what similarities are there with photography? How I approach lighting and stop motion animation. Man, as I have gotten to be a better filmmaker and cinematographer, the more I realize it's all about light. Everything is about light. And so it's very similar to photography in that way, because literally I am setting up images just like I would I'm setting up animations based around the idea of what one image looks like. And what I mean by that is, behind me, there's a set back there. And that set is going to be used for 4 shots. And each shot is a still image that I have in my mind about what it's going to look like. And all of them are, very much informed by lighting direction, the ambiance, the intensity of light, the mood of the scene. So I'm very cognizant of lighting. It's also something that I feel like I'm not super great at. It's something that with each project it gets better and better, because I'm more mindful of it now than I have ever been. And it's one of the things that I feel like is most lacking in my development as an artist or as a director, because I'm the one that's having to often set up the scene and set up the lighting. I've gotten to the point where I often don't have to animate anymore. For this project behind me, I will be animating, but I'd like to get to the point where I do less animating, more directing, more producing, and show running. I look forward to the day where I can hire a DP and they can come in and actually help light things and make it look even better than I know how to. But until then, I am doing what I've always done, and looking at the video reference, or the still image on the screen or on the monitor, and tweaking it endlessly until it gets to somewhere close to what I see in my head. That process can be grueling. It's also, I don't know, that's so. How do you approach lighting? How do I approach lighting? Oh shoot, I don't think I've answered this at all. Have I? Slowly, with patience, knowing that lighting is probably one of the most important things in storytelling that there is. What's the process for designing costumes for stop motion characters, and how does it differ from real world clothing design? Well, I'm not an expert clothing designer for real world or live action sets, so I don't think I can speak to that. But I know, when we have puppets, there's a huge part of the design process is, figuring out what are they going to wear, what's the material, how does the material, and with stop motion, I'll say this, one thing that definitely is different from real world clothing design is scale of patterns. For puppets that are 9 inches tall, you want to plaid. This is something that literally this week me and my puppet fabricator have been working on and discussing and trying to figure out. One of our characters has a plaid shirt, and it's hard to find plaid at such a small scale because plaid is very dependent on the size, and it looks a certain way in relation to other things. And so scale of clothing, scale of patterns, finding patterns that are small help sell the scale of a small puppet in a small world. And that's not necessarily just with clothing, that's with all sorts of design elements. So, if you have the stage behind me is an office or a law firm office, we have trim that runs along the entire inside of the room. Well, that trim has a slight convex shape to it. It's not a symbol. I'm trying to think if I have any of it here. I don't. But there's a lot that went into deciding what piece of wood we're going to put at the bottom base, because if the shape of it, if the curve of the trim is too dramatic or not subtle enough, it'll read differently. And it'll look like a piece of wood has fallen on this and is laying on the side of the floor, or it'll look like actually trim that somebody that lives in that small world or universe trimmed out when they were building the house that it's supposed to be. So I think patterns make a huge difference in trying to infer scale and size of things. What's the best way for a beginner to start learning stop motion animation with minimal resources? You do not need a whole studio to make a stop motion film. There is an app, if you have an iPad or an iPhone or any smartphone device, there's an app called iPad Studio, Stop Motion Studio. We use that at a lot of the camps that I teach at, and it's great. And you can even connect it to an iPad if you have a phone, and you also have an iPad. You can have the iPad as a monitor and use the phone as the actual camera device, and then you can actually release the shutter on the iPad to make the camera on your phone take an exposure, which is great because that way you're not jittering around the phone every time you want to take a photo. And it's also got onion skinning and playback, so it's a really great resource. Stop Motion Studio. I believe there's a free and a paid version. So that's a great way to get into it. How do you balance staying true to your creative vision while meeting client demands? How do you balance staying true to your creative vision while meeting clients' demands? Well, I feel like a lot of the times if I'm doing things right, if I'm running my business the way I want to run it, I am executing on a shared creative vision. It's never just mine. It's never just LoudCloud doing what we want to do or shooting by the hip. A lot of it should be something that a client comes to us and they have a lot of buy-in and they have the desires and input and they have investment in the way something is executed creatively, and that we kind of arrive at that at the pre-production phase of things, at the concepting and ideation phase. So if the question is how do you balance staying true to your creative vision while meeting client demands, with stop motion, I try to never find myself in between those two things. There's probably times, and maybe this question is more speaking to, let's say I submit a video, I give a client a video that I feel like is a good execution of what they had requested or wanted, but they come back to me and they go, Mason, we feel like it's too fast here. Can we change this or that? If it's within my abilities and within reason, and when I say within reason, I mean like it's not going to require me to reanimate a huge collection or re-enter into production mode, then we'll make changes if we can. But again, we're so much of what I do is heavy on pre-production and getting approvals, and I you can ask any client that I've worked with, I spend a good amount of time. I'm very intentional about making sure that everybody understands the process, that this is something that is very much a one and done discipline. And so that doesn't mean that we can't be creative or we can't do all sorts of things, but we have to figure those things out beforehand. So I found because of that, that it's very rare that we get to a point where I deliver a product or a end video, and then there's dramatic feedback that it is, the client looks at what we've done and it's not aligned with what they thought was going to happen. Because if I'm doing my job right, I'm sharing with them, here's what it looks like. Here's what it will probably look like. Here are examples of animations that we've done or other people have done that we're aiming for. Here is our concept art. And so we, with stop motion and with the small business that I'm trying to run, we don't want surprises. There are exceptions to that. The commercial that we're working on right now, it's an incredibly fast production, incredibly fast turnaround, with a lot of moving pieces and a rather big production for the short amount of time that we have. Because of that, I only agreed to the production knowing that, hey, we would have to shift some things. There's going to have to be some, burned in malleability with the client to just accept kind of what we give them, because we don't have time to do multiple iterations. We don't have time to develop concept art after concept art and reiterate over and over and over again. So with this project, I presented them a very well thought out and defined end visual, and that means like an animatic with supporting concept art and references. And they liked what they saw, and they said, all right, take the ball, run with it, Mason. We trust what you're going to do and what you can do. So there's a lot of trust in that regard. And so if there's a quick turnaround and a lot of heavy lifting to do within a quick turnaround, there's a lot of trust that a client just has to give to us, because in order for us to execute within a tight time frame like that, we have to kind of take things into our own hands just to work at a quick pace or quick speed. Do you think animation can teach kids important life skills or lessons? If so, how do you incorporate that into your work? Do you think animation can incorporate? Yeah, I do. Patience, for one. Patience and hard work. That's probably what I would say. Patience and hard work. To do stop motion, you have to be very patient and passionate. You have to care about what you're doing, because even myself, with every project, there are multiple phases of the project where I am tired, I'm dragging, I don't want to start, I don't want to do this one thing because it's just a lot of work. And I know that that's going to happen with each project. I know that there's going to be multiple points where I feel that. And I have to push through and recognize that that's part of the process, and be okay with it, and not be super disheartened or discouraged that I'm feeling this way, because I know it'll pass. I know if I just keep pushing through it, that I'm going to get to the end of the tunnel and be able to do the next thing, which is more rewarding or more satisfying. So delaying, instant gratification, that's a huge thing. I feel like that's important in life. Being patient and passionate. Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah. How do I guess that was another question. If so, how do you incorporate that into your work? I incorporate that into my work because that's the nature of the work, as I was just saying. But I incorporate it into my parenting for my kid by bringing my kid to the studio, letting them see what it's like, and if they're interested, showing them how to do it. And the good thing is, there's a very low barrier to entry for stop motion that can be pretty immediately rewarding. I've brought both my girls into the studio to animate, and as soon as you do one thing, take an exposure, move something else, take an exposure, move something else, take an exposure, and then you're able to play it back and see right in front of your eyes that it's coming to life. It's very gratifying, and for both of them, for both the girls, they love seeing it and are very interested in stop motion animation. So you can imagine, I love that. Do you think? Last question: How did you build your business from the ground up, and what advice do you have for someone launching their own creative business? How did you build your business from the ground up? Well, I didn't just build the business from the ground up. I had a lot of help. I had a very supportive partner, and do have a very supportive partner, a supportive co-parent. I have had my father, who has, there's a wall of tools here. Basically, 95% of the tools that we use to fabricate all of our sets have been given to me. So I'm very privileged, and it would be very it would be very stupid for me to try to point to this studio and say, look at what I've done, because I've had a lot of help along the way, a lot of mentoring, a lot of people going out of their way to teach me things. So I've accepted a lot of help, and I'll say I've tried to be a good steward of the things that I've had. Part of the draw early on part of what made Loud Cloud Animation Studio seem like it was possible was because I had a garage full of tools that helped me fabricate things in a relatively easy manner. And so there wasn't, I know a lot of animators that kind of want to do what I do, but they don't have all the tools and the space necessary to do it, so it's just easier to do something else, or easier to just try to get work just doing animation versus doing a studio. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so I guess what I'm saying is, like, I just recognize that, like, I've kind of started from a place of having a space, garage at the beginning, having support, friends, family, other creative people that kind of can work alongside me, and then having a ton of tools, But the big thing, is, my partners throughout my life have been very supportive and encouraging. That's a big thing. So, how did you build your business from the ground up? I didn't build it. I had just a huge support system and other factors that played into that. What advice do you have for someone launching their own creative business? I would say, one thing that I'll say, whether you're a photographer or videographer or whatever it is that you're doing, don't get too caught up in the external things. The gear acquisition syndrome. If you're a photographer or videographer, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like where you'll get more concerned about the cameras and the gear that you can acquire, and you don't end up actually going out and shooting, and that's crazy, because all the gear and the stuff that you have should support ultimately the main thing you're doing, which is telling stories, or getting off your butt and going actually and producing content. And so I would say, as a piece of advice, focus more about just doing. Just go out and do. Don't worry about how it turns out. Don't worry about what you have or don't have. With what you have, go out and do. And if you do that long enough, you'll be able to start expanding and go to a bigger shell once you can grow out of that shell. So many people try to, I'm using the metaphor of like shells, right? Because is it a crab, right? If you see a bigger shell, if you're too big for the shell you're in, you go to a bigger one, right? And then you can keep leveling up. So many people, so many photographers, and I was guilty of it too when I was younger, and still am to this day. I'm getting sidetracked here. So many people try to get more stuff and try to get more gear than they need, and can kind of like really burden themselves with things before they actually have the skills, the experience, and honestly the work ethic to justify all those things. Our tools should be there to support us, not hinder us. And so I would say, no matter what medium you're working on, focus on just going out and doing whatever it is, the thing that you want to do, and don't worry about getting more crap, because it doesn't matter what cool camera or lens you have if you're not using it. So go out and use what you have, and then let any growth stem from what you're doing, not what you think you would do if you only had X, Y, and Z. That's my 7 answers to the questions. I'm sorry I have a very stuffy nose today, but maybe next week it'll be better. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.